Well, my name is Solbella HaTayeret, and I am Summit's Minister of Arts and Sciences. And this is not my first rodeo doing this. Let's see, I've been it for 3 years and some odd months for this round. And then I had a 2-year break before that. And then I did it for 2 years right before Rowan had it. And so I've been Summit's Minister of Arts and Sciences for a while now. Almost 6 years, actually. A while. I kind of eat, breathe, and live it. Some things that you guys should probably know about me as a human is that I am more of, and how I feel that this is relevant actually to this office, is I myself am kind of introverted. I prefer being kind of in the background, and I prefer being not, center stage. You wouldn't guess that by me being recorded right now, but haha, new things for everyone. But you don't have to be a huge extrovert to be this position. You don't have to be in the limelight. You don't have to be always on. You don't have to always be center stage. And that's definitely something that you need to know is you can be extroverted or you can be introverted. You don't have to be one or the other. And one of the beautiful things about this job is, well, besides being my absolute favorite job in the SCA, is the people. Yes, one of the main purposes of this job is the reporting. Yes, it's important. Yes, it needs to be on time. Yes, it's sometimes like herding cats, but that's not a bad thing, right? It's all about communicating, and sometimes people need it in different ways. There, for a while, like there was one lady that I had to call every 3 months and be like, hey, let's talk about what you've been doing in your branch. And I would write her report for her because she was not very computer savvy. And then there's some people that, like, 3 years ago, I created a Google Docs for all of the reporting, and a lot of people prefer that because it's just simple. Type your stuff in, boom, done. When I very, very first started this position was, 800 years ago. And the very first report that I did as a branch Minister of Arts and Sciences, the report was 15 pages long. I don't know if anybody remembers that or anything, but it was the most ridiculous report I've ever seen in my life. And then when I stepped up, our report only had 3 questions, which wasn't enough information. So the report I created has about 12 questions, and it's pretty easy. But yeah, does anybody have any questions on reporting besides please try to get it in on time?
What are the 12 questions?
Aha, I figured somebody would have to ask me that one. Okay, so besides the typical questions like, hey, what is your name? What branch are you reporting for? Membership, when you got your position, blah, blah, blah. The other questions are, what quarter are you reporting for? Does your branch have regular meetings? And I did also put online counts since COVID started. When does your branch meet, including online meetings? What have you done for your office in the last quarter? That's a pretty standard question. Just have you done anything? Have you served in your capacity as an officer at an event during the last quarter? If so, what did you do and for which event? And in parentheses, I have online classes, online meetups, encourage creativity, i.e. show and tell. Have you had any challenges or successes? Do you have any concerns or questions? What can the Summit's officer do to assist you? And what is something you would like to see improved in your area? Those are my basic questions. Most of COVID times, answers have been pretty simple, nothing to report, which is kind of sad, to be honest, because there's a lot we can do online. and it's a huge opportunity that we could be using. Anything from posting class videos that you find on YouTube to meetups on Discord to you name it. Like, there's so many things we can do online. And to be perfectly frank, online is actually more accessible for those folks who can't go to an event. So it's definitely something, even though we are moving into getting back in person, online is still a huge resource that we shouldn't let go of, because there's so many people who have handicaps or people who have like just time limitations. For example, like if you work on the weekend, how are you going to go to bed? Or what if you work evenings? Then you don't have the ability to go to class. But if it's online or if it's recorded or YouTube or something like that, then you still have that opportunity to feel like you're part of something, even if you're not there. So even though we're moving into in person, I would love to see in our areas still continuing the online if we can, at least to a point. And I do see, Meryl, you've got a question?
Yes. You said one of your questions was, have there been any meetings at your branch? Is that A&S specific meetings, or would the business meeting count?
A&S specific. Some branches do have like a little A&S thing before their business meeting. So that could count for both. But it's more A&S specific.
Would that also include A&S related gatherings that are not Shire activities? For example, in my branch, there is one fairly large and active household that has private A&S meetings twice a month.
Okay. So how we record that is a little bit different. So what I would do on that report is definitely be like, hey, you know, for my branch, this is what we did officially. And then I'd put like a little asterisk of this particular household did other things and name those things. Are you talking like House Capuchin or
I'm talking House Blackheart.
Blackheart? Okay, perfect.
I know that they're mostly a fighting house, but Kaya does A&S, and twice a month she invites household members to join her for A&S.
Okay.
But it
We
is
do.
not an open invite to the Shire.
Yeah, so we're really focusing on the whole, not specifics. But honestly, like if there's some group that's doing something amazing and you've got like nothing else to report and it's like, I need to put something, and of course you can add them. There's nothing wrong with that. But we are really more focusing on those reports being the whole picture, because it's not necessarily fair to say that, you know, hey, you know, this household's doing a bunch of stuff, but we've done nothing. Does that make sense?
Okay.
But you can report it. It's up to you. There's nothing wrong with that. Any other questions?
Sure. I have a question relating to what you said earlier about how you don't have to be an extrovert for this job. My question is, do you need to be a well-connected introvert? Do you need to know who the experts are on the various arts and sciences so that you can properly delegate and do things like, hey, we need somebody to teach newbies how to sew a tea tunic. Any volunteers?
So it's not necessarily well connected, like you don't have to be friends with everybody. So what I like to do, and I know this sounds kind of stalkerish and I apologize, but I like going to different events and different activities that happen, and I'll just hang out in the background. If I see somebody who's doing something super cool, I'll write it down or like send myself like a little text message of, hey, this person's really cool. They're really good at this thing. Or if I go to like a showing of like, say, an A&S demonstration and like, here's this person who's done like amazing leather craft. I'll be like, so-and-so does amazing leather craft. Maybe contact them or somebody that you know who knows them. Because yeah, I may not know them and I might get super duper shy and be like, I can't contact that person. Oh God, the social anxiety. But I might know somebody who knows them better. And so I might reach out to them, and then they might reach out to them. And then we might make a connection through a mutual friend. Um, that tends to be a lot more of how I do it, is reaching out to those people that I do know. Because otherwise, yeah, it gets really scary sometimes.
Could you
um,
have a deputy in charge of talent management if
you
you
can,
chose to delegate that?
of course, you can have as many deputies as you want. You can have students, you can have uh, anybody. If you want a whole crew of A&S and all you do is just the reports, heck yeah, do it. Make it so. I mean, you can have as many people as you want. Anybody who wants to like help with a job, that's
Well,
amazing.
I feel it's not just make it so, it's also make it cook, make it carve,
Yeah.
make it brew.
Yes. There's a lot of that. But yeah, so if you want a whole crew, that's amazing. If you want to delegate to your big crew or little crew, then that makes your job that much easier. And just make sure that they report to you on kind of what they've been up to, even if it's just an email or a Facebook message of, hey, I did this thing. I think it would be really cool. And then that way you can report it on yours. Or, if you've got a big event coming up, like, for example, Summits A&S is coming up. I have run this event about 3 times now, something like that. And it's good to know people who can gather the people to teach all the classes or to help run the thing. And it's magical when it all, comes together. It's just you're the ringleader, so you got to kind of, keep tabs on who's doing what, when, and where. Um, and sometimes it's easier doing it just through messages. Sometimes you got to do a little bit more talking and mingling. There's nothing wrong with that. And you know what? If you're having super like social anxiety doing that sort of thing, bring your buddy with you. Somebody who's really comfortable with the talking. Just be like, hey, I need a stand-in who can help with the talkie-talkie. Yay! I have done that more than once. Because there's some people who, no offense to them, but pure fear happens. And I get kind of scared to talk to them because they're amazing. And oh my God, I'm going to ask them to see if they can teach a class. I need to find my peer friend who can come with me to say hi to the person. So it's not a bad thing. It's kind of fun actually to have your little buddy. Um, but yeah, you can have a whole crew. And one of the most amazing things about the SCA is the entirety, and this might wrinkle some uh, linen over there, but the entirety of the SCA is arts and sciences. And I know that sounds really wrong, but it's not. The art of fighting, the science of fighting, the art of building a tent, the art of service. It is all arts and sciences. Without arts and sciences, the SCA does not exist. And so what we do is we bring the magic. And we are, not only are we people who help organize the magic, we're also people that help encourage the magic. So if you've got like that newbie who just made their first tea tunic, you know what? Send them a little message. Like if you're too shy to, just send it on Facebook of, hey, I saw your new tea tunic. That looked amazing. And you know what? That little spark makes them go on this huge journey of, I made a tea tunic. What if I can make like a cane or shoes or, a big tent? Those little sparks help build, and those sparks build the string. And that's what we have to help facilitate. So that is the biggest part of my job, I think, is helping to create that spark. And so anytime I see a new person who's like, oh, look, I just made this leather pouch. It's my very first leather pouch. You know what? I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. How did you do that? Talk to me about it. Where did you get your inspiration? And that just lets people explode with what information they gave you. You don't have to say anything after that because they will take you on a journey of where they got their information, where they found the leather, how long it took them. I mean, it's a 45-minute conversation that you said like 4 things. But you know what? It made them feel so special. And that's that spark. That's what you need to help give them. And then when they get better and better and better at that leather, pouch, that's when you can be like, hey, have you thought about putting it in a demo? Have you thought about, teaching how to make this pouch? Have you thought about, because you don't have to be an expert teacher. You don't have to be like anything really. Like if you have an interest and if they have that spark of, I want to share this thing, perfect opportunity for a class. Like even if it's an online class or just something where they don't even have to like look at people and just be like, oh my God, here's this thing. I did it. It's really pretty. I like it. And this is how I got all this stuff. Right. And because that's what we need in the SCA is we need a ton more classes taught by newer people, because that helps them build, that helps them grow, that helps build more confidence. And that's magical. I'm sorry, but I think it's so magical to see people just sparkle and to find their passion and to just sparkle, right? But yeah, so that's a huge part of what I think my job is helping to find that sparkle. And also matchmaking. A lot of my job is definitely matchmaking, because you get different classes and stuff like that. And, people are like, oh my God, I've got 4 classes that I need to fill and I don't have anybody, and be like, okay, what are you interested in? And they can tell me, and I'll be like, all right, well, I vaguely remember last summer, uh, Rufus learned how to do this really cool chain thing. That's a cool jewelry class. Maybe reach out to him, and then kind of get them in contact with each other. Yay for Facebook Messenger. I gotta say, Facebook Messenger is amazing. But yeah, so you can connect these people and poof, there's a class. And so it's a lot of, hey, I remember seeing that thing. So my little texts to myself of, hey, so and so's really good at this. Or, hey, this might be an interesting class. I have like a stockpile of it. And so when somebody's like, oh man, I really need a null binding teacher. Okay, what style of null binding do you want? Do you want more historically accurate, or do you want, what do you want? And then I can go through my little list and then ta-da.
Of course you want historically accurate, because that maintains our status as an educational nonprofit focused around a certain time period.
Yes, that is the primary idea. However, if you've got a little bitty branch that just needs a class and you've got somebody who's not necessarily perfectly historically period, if you've got somebody who's willing to teach or somebody who's willing to show a thing, sometimes a little less accurate and a little bit more creativity is not a bad thing. I mean, yes, we may want it, but sometimes you got to get what you get. And creativity is part of our name.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about arranging arts and sciences competitions.
Sure. Okay, so for branch levels, A&S competitions are actually fairly easy, because it's whatever rules you want. I definitely recommend starting with kind of like a expectations list, and getting people to definitely let you know ahead of time of what they're bringing, because that will help you sort judges first. Because there's nothing worse than getting to the event and somebody showing up and being like, oh, I made all these like 500 different things. And you're like, oh, we asked for 2. And I have no idea what half that stuff is. Okay, now I have to find judges. All right, let's see who's around that I can gather. Thankfully, On Tier has a really good A&S judging sheet. You can dumb it down for summits, and you can dumb it down even further for branches, or you could use the original. It's whatever floats your boat the most, but definitely to maintain continuity, I would definitely let your contestants know what they're being judged on ahead of time. So definitely judging sheets and kind of your expectations, like, hey, you need to have 3 things, or hey, this is the theme, or hey, this is what we expect. Because otherwise you get a menagerie of all the things. And then if you've got like 800 different judging sheets, it gets very confusing very quickly, and not everybody is judged equally. So that's definitely a big thing. When it comes to finding judges, that's kind of a who do you know and who do you know that they know. So that's definitely one of those like networking spider web things. Definitely laurels are kind of a go-to, but if you don't have any of those, then those people that you feel have either an expertise or are more comfortable or more knowledgeable in that particular subject. So like if you've got somebody who's got a beautiful wooden bowl that they created, like I would probably go find Nemo if he was coming to my event and be like, dude, can you judge this wooden bowl? Because I know that that man, even though he's not a laurel, will know more about that dang bowl than I ever will. Now, that's not saying that I can't judge it. I mean, anybody can judge anything because we can be kind of judging creatures, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's fair. So trying to find that person who's much more comfortable with that, like Nemo in the wood bowl, or say if you've got somebody bringing in their fighting kit for a 15th century French blah blah blah, I don't know them anyway, then I would find, you know, maybe a person who knows a lot more about 15th century French fighting blah blah blah, right? So that you find best matches that you can for judges. They don't have to be a they don't have to be an expert, they don't have to be a laurel, but somebody with some knowledge is always better. And you can, if you've got somebody who's never ever judged before, you can have student judges too. Let people learn how to judge. Like it's so often we have competitions that, you know, somebody's like, well, I know a little bit about this, but I can't do that because I don't know how to be a judge. Pair them up with somebody who's been a judge for 1,000 years. Like it's not difficult. Like teach people how to give kind critique. Teach people how to look at these judging sheets. Teach people how to be a good judge. And I say kind critique because I think that's a big thing. Like there are some judges that I will never pick because they don't know how to give critique in a kind way. And it's a shame, but it's a fact, right? I prefer a sandwich technique myself. You know, compliment, kind critique, compliment, because people are putting their souls like into these projects, and if you rip it apart, they're never going to want to show again. I mean, that's one of the hardest things to do. I've done it, and it's so nerve-wracking, and like these people, like you put your heart into it, and to get nothing but meanness, even if it's not meant to be mean, you gotta weigh that out. So there's always some judges that I will probably never go to again. But I always know if I've got somebody who is a little bit harsher, I might pair them with 2 others that are super nice. So, you know, they're my little Russian judge, right? And I figure out ways of in between time of going to that person and being like, hey, how you feeling? How's it going for you? Do you need water? You know, how are you feeling after this? Because you're kind of like, I call it my mom moment. Even though I'm not a mom, it's my mom moment of after these competitors just get judged after a thing. I'm like, okay, what you doing? How you feeling? Do you need water? Do you need a break? Do you want me to watch your stuff? Because sometimes they need that breather. Or 2, have a snack. Like I have granola bars and everything else like in my little side pouch for these competitors. It's ridiculous, but you never know, right? Because if quite a few people get nervous and they don't eat or they don't drink or they don't sleep for 3 days ahead of time. So it's as a person who's running the thing, maybe that's kind of something that you think about of, you know, maybe I have like a stash of Gatorade and granola bars just in case. Meryl, you've got another question?
Yes, as long as we're talking about A&S competitions,
Yes.
what are the pros and cons of having an A&S competition as opposed to something like Athenaeum, where it's not a competitive aspect to it?
That is a beautiful question. So I would judge your area for that. So if you've got a group of people that you know will never, ever, ever do competitions, but they've got amazing stuff, then I might host like a mini Athenaeum, because that's what more of my area wants. Whereas if you've got a huge like group of people who are like, I want competition, I want to know I'm the best, I want, huge prizes, I want this, that, and the other thing, then I would focus more on a competition-y type thing. So it's really just judging your area, because one's going to go over better than the other. Although you can do both. So if you've got time, energy, patience to do both, that's probably the most preferred method. And every A&S competition that I've ever run, I've also had a non-judging section, and I've had just a display section. So I've got my people who are like, yes, I want to know I'm the best and win the prizes. And that's cool. But if you've got people who are like, I just want somebody to tell me if I'm on the right path, and I just want kindness, or I just want, to know I'm doing okay, you've got those people too. And so I would have, different sections, right? Competition folks over here, display folks who don't even want to like be next to their stuff, but they just want to show what they've got. And then you've got your more Athenaeum-y style things. One method that I saw, which was really, really cool, it was actually in California. What they did was they had books, they had a critique book, and they had a compliment book. And they just laid it out next to their stuff. And so the judges or audience or whomever you have can write a critique or a compliment. And one of the things that I told my judges, one of the things that they told the judges at the time was, when you critique, make sure that it is thorough but kind. And I know I've said that like 1,000 times, and it's like whipping a dead horse, but kind critique. It's such a big thing. But yeah, and so that way the person who's doing more like an Athenaeum thing, like you can do it in person where they talk, or you could do it in a book style, which is always fun too. And they can look at the critique parts when they are mentally prepared for it, or they could just look at the compliments, or they could just have a compliment book only, or they could have just a critique book, or whatever floats their boat, whatever will help them grow. So it's really up to you as the organizer, knowing your group. Does that answer the question?
Sure, but I have more questions.
Okay, all the questions, go for it.
How meaningful is it to judge different arts and sciences against each other? You could have one person presenting a research paper about period astronomy practices, somebody else having built a period siege engine, somebody else with deep fried pastries, lovingly documented. I mean, things are just so wildly different.
Yeah. So in an ideal world, obviously we do pastries against pastries, or siege engines against siege engines. I mean, in an ideal world. However, that's probably never going to happen. I mean, it'd be cool. Like if we had like a whole siege engine event, hot diggity, that would be so cool. Anyway, it's not necessarily fair, and it's not necessarily going to be the best idea. However, it's the best we got, right? So you have to judge that pastry against a siege engine. And so that's where it really comes down to your judges, to find people who've got that expertise or have that ability to know more about the thing. That's how you make it be more fair. Because if you've got the same, 3 people doing all the judging for all the things, that doesn't necessarily mean that they know anything about the work that happened in the siege engine, or, that pastry was a little flaky, but it wasn't anything that I liked eating, so I'm going to judge it badly, right? So it's best to have, as the organizer, to have the judges who know more about the thing to help it be more fair. Do you have other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Are A&S competitions period practice?
Yes, sort of, kind of. So there is a period thought to them, not necessarily are they done like the same way that we're doing them. But you've always had everything from livestock being judged against each other. You've always had things like, oh, I'm going to make this beautiful thing for the king, and it's presented with like 500 other things that are beautifully made for the king. So competition between craftspeople has always happened. So technically, yes, it's period. The way we do it, not as much, because it's different things against different things. I think that answers the question. Other questions?
I
Jackie
would
has a
like
hand
to
up.
comment in on the discussion about the competitors
Okay.
in a challenge. What I've always been told, and what I've always told people, is that they're not competing against each other. They're competing against the standard for competing. So what level are these artists? Are these artisans? Are they beginner level, advanced, whatnot? They grade themselves on that. And that's the standard that they are then judged against. So if you have somebody who identifies as a beginner doing kumihimo, and you have somebody who's advanced using a Norse loom, they're not quite the same, but if they both go about it the same way, as period as possible, documented their techniques that they used, any of the materials, why they decided to use something versus what may have been used in period. As somebody though, like if this was a competition for, say, somebody making, becoming the next champion for that group, when somebody says, oh, I identify as beginner and the other person identifies as advanced, there's a credit score to that. So the beginner would be given like a 1 just for, hey, coming out. The advanced person would be given a 2 or a 6 or whatever is the designation. And then they already start with a +6 on their side just because they self-identified as advanced. Now it's up to them to live up to that standard in the competition. The beginner person, they have to live up to beginner standards, whereas advanced person has to live up to their advanced. And I've been slammed. I claimed myself as an advanced on a competition once, and I was slammed. It was rough, but it was all honest, all absolutely honest. And I needed that at the time. Actually, I didn't know I needed it at the time. It took me a little while to finally figure out that I needed that. So yeah, it's not necessarily that in competitions people are competing against each other. It's against the standard that has been established.
Yeah, it's not against each other. I mean, yes, in a competition there is one winner, but it is, depending on what judging forms you use, would depend on how you go, which is why I like the kingdom ones as much as I do, because there is that rubrics that shows you, like, if this person's a beginner, this is where you're starting at, or if you're advanced, this is where you're starting at, and it's a competition not only against yourself but the standard, and it's more individualized rather than like all pastry chefs ever, right? Did you have another question, Marl?
As always, does Bardic fall under the arts and sciences?
Yes, it does. Very much so. Everything is arts and sciences, but yes, as far as competitions and stuff go, Bardic is definitely high up there. And that includes all forms of Bardic. So a puppeteer is just as important as that soprano opera singer. So back to competitions, I guess. So one thing that I have noticed as kind of more of a recenty thing, which I think is kind of cool, since we're getting into more of a warm, fuzzy area of competitions versus the harsh ones that we used to do. One thing that I noticed a lot of organizers doing, which I think is actually pretty cool, is talking to your competitors before the actual competition and talking to them about um, how they communicate, what's the most comfortable ways for them, and how they need to respond to questions and things like that. Because somebody who's got, say, ADHD is going to need something way different than somebody who's, normal, right? So being able to have that conversation ahead of time of, hey, what's best for you? Do you want questions in between things, or are you comfortable with more, you do your spiel and then answer questions? So that's definitely something as a organizer that you can have that conversation with those people, because it's really good for them. And it also helps make that experience as a competitor or as a display person much more comfortable, and then people aren't as scared to do it in the future. So I think as we progress in getting more comfortable with people with differences, that we really express that, we really help them feel more comfortable. And yeah, so it's definitely something that I've been reading more into of, let's see how we can, bring people back into A&S competitions and displays, because for a long while there, it was kind of a bit of a drought because it was kind of scary. As being somebody who's a little bit ADHD, I prefer typically having questions at the end, because then I can get through my spiel and then I don't freak out during my spiel.
We
Whereas
shut up
like,
and let you spiel then?
no, actually, so I mentally prepared to be interrupted for this. So I've got little spiels that I go on, but I actually had to be like, okay, they're going to ask me questions at random. Okay, questions at random. Let's prepare for it. Right? Oh, I sound insane, but it's true.
Okay, what's your next little spiel?
Let's talk about Summit's level A&S. So as Summit's Minister of Arts and Sciences, it is not my responsibility technically to run the competition. It's the previous competitor who won. Now, this comes with a lot of hinks and kinks and twists and turns, and can be very stressful. That being said, communication is key. There's going to be some of the champions that won't tell you what they're doing or who their judges are or who anything is until about 5 minutes before you arrive. And that's a nightmare, because the more knowledge I have of what's going on in the competition ahead of time, if you pull out last minute, I'm not lost, because I am the drop dead competition runner. So if the champion ditches last minute, it's me. I have to do it. And so if my champion's not telling me anything, I'm hosed. And I have to come up with things on the fly. And so sometimes I have a panic attack because this has happened more than once. And yeah, it's scary. So more communication ahead of time, like the moment somebody steps up is usually the moment I get in contact with them of, hey, I'm your backup and we got to be on the same page. And technically there is a rule book, for A&S and Bardic championships. Granted, this rule book is the worst rule book I've ever seen in my life, and I wouldn't recommend it as a read because it's dreadful and it makes no sense. For example, Bardic has to be done at night after the championships of all the things, and it has to be done around a fire. and it has to have 3 judges per competitor. And the first year we did it that way. I was one of the 3 competitors, and it went sing the song, judging questions. They deliberated for like half an hour. We didn't get done with the competition till 3 a.m. It was awful. Nobody needs to do that. So that rule book is awful. But so there is a standard for A&S, and that is 3 pieces and documentation, things like that. There have been competitors in the past who have not listened to this and kind of done their own thing. And it's gotten mixed reviews. So yeah, good times. But yeah, so there is a standard in the rule book. It does need to be rewritten. And the more communication you have with the champion, the better, because if they magically get sick or decide to, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go to France this week. Bye. You're doing what? Who's your judges? Do you have anything? Who's your competitors? And then you have to start from scratch, basically, figuring out all the things. And it's not pretty. And if you've ever seen me running around at an event, like mid panic attack, trying to find all the judges and the things, yeah, that happens. So if you ever become a champion or become the A&S minister, communication. It's a beautiful thing. Let's see. Bardic is probably the more complicated one out of A&S. Like A&S, you have to make sure that there's tables, chairs, and decent lighting is really like the main thing. Inside preferred, and since it's in February, it's usually easier to find it inside. However, when it comes to Bardic, that is the harder portion, because Bardic can be a lot of different things. It could be storytelling, puppets, it could be people singing, it could be musical instruments, it could be a whole slew of things, right? So the ideal is obviously to have some sort of like stagey type area, and because why are you doing a performance art without an audience? So it's always nice to have an audience area. It's always nice to have it be in a warm indoor area, preferably not next to a fire, because between instruments and vocals and things like that, that smoke is going to destroy voices. And then you've got people wheezing, asthma, and bleh, it's gross. And if it's too cold, you've got musical instruments that go way out of tune. If it's too hot, musical instruments go way out of tune. So if you can, do something that has heat control. About 70 degrees is preferred for most instruments. God, I sound like a very upset musician over here. I've got a violin that is so picky, it's not even funny. If it's like 75 degrees, it gets out of tune. So most instruments do prefer around 70, low humidity. Vocalists too. So yeah, if you can find something that's obviously wherever they're having the event, you kind of have to deal with it, right? But if there's any way you can find like a room or a spot that has any way where you could put like a space heater or a dehumidifier or even a humidifier, like just to make that area more conducive to a performance, that would be obviously ideal. So that might require a little pre-planning on your end, which kind of sounds crazy. But if you've got, somebody bringing in a harpsichord, how are you going to get that harpsichord in there? Right? So you got to think about those things, because I've seen somebody bring a harpsichord to a Bardic performance. So yeah, definitely something to think about, of, knowing what the competitors are doing, knowing what their needs are going to be. Like if you've got a competitor who's bringing the harpsichord, are they bringing their chair too? Are they going to need, do they have somebody to, flip their music? Do they have water, right? I swear, water and granola bars. It's a thing. Get a kit. um, but yes, so it's A&S is way different than Bardic. And if you've got both, say you're doing Summit's Bardic and A&S event, you have to plan all of it together. And it's very stressful. And if you've got food on top of that, then it's also keeping track of the kitchen. But as A&S persons, you really focus on those two things. Granted, food is also arts. Anyway, but so it's competition, right? You're going to have a lot of people with nerves and not, this is going to sound awful, please don't take it this way. You have some people who are a little bit more passionate than others in what their needs are. I've had some people demand specific temperatures and specific types of flooring and specific types of everything. Yeah, see, I know that face. Yeah, I was making that same face going, I can't do bamboo flooring. Where am I going to get bamboo flooring? And so for some of the competitors that want very specific things, I'll be like, well, I got this and I can accommodate this. But if you're wanting this, this, and this, might I suggest you bring it from home? Or, if you need more help, maybe I can help by finding somebody in your area who might be able to bring your stuff from home with you as kind of a travel person. Because I can't provide everything, right? It's not my responsibility to make sure you've got the bamboo floor. That's way above my pay grade. I can provide water, a dehumidifier. I can do a lot, but there's some things that I'm like, I'm not providing a $15,000 sound system. Not going to happen. I've got speakers, I got a mic. It's a handheld mic, or I've got something like this. I can't rewire an entire building so that your vocal performance can be heard throughout the whole building. Can't do it. Sorry. I know, I'm being totally unreasonable. I should be able to provide these things, but I can't. Anyway, so yes, it is good to help your competitors to the best of your ability. However, make sure you know where your bar is of what you're willing to do. And be comfortable with the word no. I'm the worst at the word no, but it's a word that you have to learn. And it is definitely something that you might make some people mad, and you're not going to be everybody's friend, unfortunately. But you have to be able to say no for you, because this is a volunteer position and you're just trying to make people happy. There's only so much you can do. Any other questions on that?
Always.
Yay!
Oh, never mind.
I love questions.
Is it legal to have
Dun, dun,
groups enter an arts and sciences competition? Like maybe you have people who do dance, and there aren't that many dances that don't involve a partner or even multiple groups so that you can switch around. Or for instance, finger loop braiding. Most of the more advanced braids require more than two hands to do. So they would be a collaboration between 2 to 4 people.
True.
Is there a way that groups, that teams, heck, somebody has a Shakespearean theater troupe, for them to enter an A&S championship together as a team?
So that is a fantastic question. So we actually did have this come up not that long ago of a group wanting to do a whole puppet production. And oh my gosh, I was so excited about this. But the thing is that they can all be judged individually as part of the group, or you need to have a separate group category. So if you've got multiple groups wanting to compete against each other, like if you've got that puppet group, you've got that Shakespeare group, you've got a dance team, then they can all be part of a group performance-y thing, and that would be its own judgment. Or you can pick individuals as part of that team. You can't do a group as its own individual. Does that make sense?
So at what level is that decided? Is that something where the previous champion makes the call when they design the rules around the next competition? Is it something in principality law, kingdom law, corpora?
There are no rules for it, actually. It's one of those, like there were rules like 10 years ago. They have not really been readdressed since then. And I do believe they were kingdom. But
So
it's
what you're saying is, I need to be queen so I can change that.
yes, darling.
Because I think arts and sciences is even cooler when people work together.
It is. It's very cool. And I would love to see more groups get together. Like, wouldn't it be amazing to see, like, that 15th century French, armor done by multiple armorers? Wouldn't that be freaking cool? Like, or the dance troupe. I think it'd be amazing. However, it's just how rules are written kind of limits the field a little bit, right? You've got either individuals or you've got everybody as a group. And that kind of sucks. But also it makes it more fair, right? So it's really whatever you want. And if you're queen, your rule is about as good as the king's. So go for it. Do what you want.
Okay, my next question
Yes.
is, over the plague, I've seen a lot of really awesome arts and sciences come through online in the form of special interest symposiums, whether it be all about this culture or all about this craft. I've seen it
Okay.
go both ways. Is there any way where we can encourage that sort of interaction around the summits? Because it seems to me that when you've got a more specialized group, they kind of elevate each other to a higher level. There's a synergy that happens. So how can we do that? How can we encourage guilds that go across branches, or symposiums for specific arts, or things like that?
So obviously themed events is definitely a huge thing that will help with that, or themed competitions or themed sections of an event. So like, for example, if you've got, say, frostbite coming up and you do kind of a, hey, winter, outdoor wear for Norse or something like that. I mean, to have like a in-person competition for that of, hey, we're all starting with, this much fabric, and let's get them together with teams, and like, let's, who has the best outfit at the end of the day or whatever. So you can do individual things within an event, or you can have a whole event dedicated to, like, let's say we'll do a Minoan feast or something like that. Granted, there'd be rules, but it's not difficult to do. It's just getting people to be interested in it. So a lot of advertising would have to go into it, as well as encouragement, and maybe even getting some of those specialized groups to maybe help with like flavor texting, or help with encouragement, or help with sharing some of their love, their sparkle for their craft. That would definitely help elevate either that section or that event as a whole. So that's what I would recommend. That does require, work and planning, but it's definitely doable. Did that answer your question at all?
I mean, I have to admit, what I was hoping to hear is, oh, didn't you know? We already have like 5 different guilds here in the summits.
So there used to be a ton of guilds in the summits. The summits used to be very, very, very guild heavy about 15 years ago. Since then, it has kind of declined, and definitely during COVID, it's gotten even more dwindly. What I'm seeing more trend wise now is more individual households doing different things together and having A&S days or having their own like little mini feasts. So a lot more households have taken over rather than guilds. At least that's the trend I'm seeing.
Okay.
Because typically households that get together typically have like specific passions that they have that kind of meld well together, and so that's why they've got, hey, for example, I'm part of Rampant Squirrel, and like we have like tent making parties where we all spend like a weekend building a new kitchen tent or something like that. Or we had, let's make 18 new silk banners, right? So that's what my household did. But there's not a whole lot of across summits guilds. And that's not that we can't do that. It's just, it's not a trend right now. It's not that it couldn't be. Like, we could bring this back. Like, let's figure out how to bring it back. I'd be down for that. Let's talk about encouragement for new officers. I suppose that's a good subject. So Clovis actually mentioned it a lot earlier of people assuming that you needed experience for these jobs. The thing is that you don't need experience to do these jobs. You just have to have the passion in order to do them. If you want to learn, there's almost always somebody willing to teach. Like, for example, I love this job. I'd be willing to teach it on a branch level all the way up to kingdom level if you want me to, because it's something that I'm passionate about. And yes, a lot of the basics are, competitions versus reporting versus, being a matchmaker. That's the primary of my job. But, if it's learning a new thing for you, then let's do it. And it kind of falls back on what we had talked about earlier of having a crew. And I had mentioned students. If there's somebody who wants to learn how to be an A&S minister, take them on as a student. Wouldn't that be great? So that they can kind of learn the job without having to be responsible for the job yet. And they can learn and feel the greatness of it. And, if you've got somebody who's interested in doing it, but, they're not quite ready yet, be like, hey, I stepped down in 6 months. Do you want to be my student for the next 6 months? I can share everything with you, and you can see if it's still something you want. And in, 2 months, we'll re-talk about, if this is something you want to pursue. Because some people just need a trial period to see if this is even something that they love. Because it's not right for everybody, right? Like, there's some people that would get into this position and be like, ooh, that's too much talking. Oh God. It's not that bad. Most 90% of my communication is online, which is much more comfortable for me. But when we get back into eventing, some of it's going to be in person too. So if somebody wants to try it, take them on as a student, or say you're going to job shadow for a while, or just internship, whatever you want to call it, to make it seem less scary and more welcoming, and help them learn the ropes without having to necessarily be the job. Not that you can't just jump into the job, but even if I had somebody who wanted this job tomorrow, I'd be like, hey, let me guide you through our next reporting system so that you've got somebody who's, holding on to the reins with you, so you're not, with a wild Mustang by yourself, right? Let me help. Because everybody needs a little bit of support. Everybody needs to feel like they're not left by themselves, because most people, jump ship when they don't feel like they're being supported. So for me, I am a big fan of making sure people feel supported and heard. And so if people have like, hey, I've been doing this job by myself for a year, I have no idea what I'm doing. Maybe that's a time that I'll be like, okay, well, what do you want to do with your job? What would make your job easier? Right. So even if you've got no experience, you got thrown into it because, oh my God, we needed a body, which happens a lot. It's good to reach out to that new person and be like, okay, what do you want to make this job? Because funny thing is A&S is actually probably one of the most moldable jobs in the SCA, right? Because we encompass everything. So we can do so much more. Like the only thing that's really required is reporting, right? But if you've got, an armor smith who's got open nights at their shop, maybe make a, big deal out of that in your shire. Be like, hey, on the second Tuesday of every month, we're welcome here. Let's make this official. Let's make this a thing. Or, if you've got somebody who's really good at woodworking and they've got an open shop, make a night of it, Or like if you're starting from scratch, you have no idea who's in your group, things like that. It's so easy to send out to your Facebook groups, Yahoo emails, if you still got them. Most places don't. I think Cordoval still does. I think I'm the only person still left on it. Anyway, it's easy enough to send a Google form out when you very first start the job too, of figuring out what your area wants. And it's super easy. Like, do you guys want to focus on woodworking? Do you want to focus on, you know, making costumes? Do you want to focus on hats? Or do you guys as a whole like competitions, or do you like displays? Or what do we as a whole want to do with A&S in our group? Right? Do you want to meet regularly, or do you want to just be like, hey, this really cool person is coming from out of town. Do we want to sponsor them to teach a class on a weekend day? That's pretty cool. I mean, there's dukes and whatnot that travel. From what I've heard, I don't really go to those things because I'm not really a fighty person. But that's part of A&S too, because it's a class. It's arts. It's sciences. You can make it a thing. It's amazing what you can do when you're new. And it's even better when you're new, when you want to figure out what your group as a whole wants to do, because it actually changes fairly regularly. Like you get different people in your group all the time because people move, people come into the area, people are new, people learn new things. So I have several different questionnaires that I've got of what do you want to learn? And I've also got one of what do you like to teach? This is an amazing tool because then you get to learn who your teachers are and if they like to teach. And then you could have them teach the things that match your stuff. And ta-da, matchmaking. Sorry, I get a little excited about those sort of things. But it's amazing what you can do, like especially when you're brand new, because then people are like, oh, well, they're new. They're just trying to learn the area. Whereas if you've been doing this job for, 6 years and you're like, could you fill out this form? Or less inclined. But if you're new, people are much more inclined because they want to help you out. And the amazing thing about the SCA is when somebody's new, more people are willing to assist and be part of it because they want you to stay because more people is good. Yep. It's also good to meet up with your newcomers people. I can't remember that word at the moment. Chatelaine? No, Chatelaine. Haha, I got it right. I always mix Chatelaine and Chamberlain. I'm sorry, it's
Me too.
horrible, but I mix them all the time. Anyway, so it's always good also to get with your Chatelaine because they're the new person, right? So if you can make more newcomers feel special and heard, then they'll want to stay and then they'll get the spark and then more people.
I think you have done an absolutely wonderful job covering the bases. And I appreciate that very much. It's good to have questions that we don't necessarily think of come up and get answered. So thank you very much for doing that.
No problem. And the more people we can get, interested in pretty much anything that the SCA is, which is arts and sciences, sticking to that. The key thing that I really want everybody to, leave with is definitely encourage to the best of your ability. Kindness is a thing. And if you see somebody who's new, who just made their tea tunic, it's a beautiful thing to be like, oh my God, I love your tea tunic. It's a beautiful color on you. And you know what? That little sparkle will make a big, flame at some point, right? And that's what we're all about, is helping people grow, helping people learn, helping people become more confident, and for them to be able to do the same thing for others.
Mhm.
So we as A&S folks, and any folks in the SCA, especially officers and those with the shiny hats, it's very important for us to help people want to be in the stream with us.